Hi, welcome to another episode of I Mustache You Something. I've got uh, I I'm gonna get pummeled for introducing her like this. Paul's sister. But like we recorded with Paul first, so people might already know Paul, and it doesn't define you completely to be Paul's sister, and that's not what I'm saying. But as I refer to Paul as my brother, Nadia is my sister. And again, being my sister doesn't define you. It's just, you know, I feel like I can always get into trouble uh,
Yep.
introducing anybody or saying anything.
Mm.
Am I fine? Is this okay so far?
That's totally fine.
Okay. And I walked right into it. I don't know if you saw when I was talking to Mira and I said, Mira's, she's going to get mad if I say family. And Mira's like, no, that's fine. That means I just didn't pick you. And I was like, I was trying not to get insulted. And now I just walked right into it. So I think Nadia and I are both happy that we're family. Like
Mhm.
it's not something we take sort of begrudgingly like Mira and I do because we're like, frenemy family. Nadia and I are like actual friend family, like happy.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, yes,
So Nadia, you live in Nairobi, Kenya,
yes.
uh, and I came to visit you, and I got this shirt from what's Fatty's last name?
Rustum, but his store is called Bonk.
Bonk. Is it still going?
The store is not there, but the brand is there.
Really? Okay, that's awesome. So this is like free advertising for Bonk,
Bonk. Yeah.
Bonk, Bonk. Like
Yes,
the
exactly.
cake from my Big Fat Greek Wedding. Bonk, a bonk? No, a bunt, a bunt.
No, not that one. I thought you were joking.
So Nadia lives in Kenya and she's from New York. So I'm wearing
Woo!
actually one of my favorite shirts.
Untouchables.
So Nadia, how did that happen? How'd you end up there?
How did I end up here?
Yeah.
I was first of all, let me just say I was hoping to be the shortest of all of your guests, and now you asked a question that will not let it be short, but I'll try to be short.
Wait,
Um,
hold on. Before you answer, why did you want to be the short one?
just because this makes me nervous.
Like, so once again, you've seen Peter Pham. Like, there's there is no way, there is no way that you're going to be the worst one because I mean he's like head and shoulder, and he knows this. Like I'm not talking about him or behind his back. Like I will send him this clip of me telling him not only is he the worst interview that I've done, I think it's the worst interview that anyone's done in the history of interviews. Like there's something very special about how terrible that interview was. It goes in a museum. So again, like you're not going to be the worst one. Like if it's short, it can be short and bad. So being short doesn't really help you in any way. So we'll talk, and you'll offer us your perspective, which I value as always. And if someone likes it, great. If they don't like it, they can go to listen to Peter's Fams, and you know
Good points.
maybe they'll like that one. I don't know. Who knows? It actually has more views than Mike Gabor, and I sent a screenshot to Mike with the number of views for Peter circled and the number of views for Mike, and he's like, "What? How did that happen?" I'm like, "I don't know." He's like,
Why did
"Who
you go
likes
look at the
listening to
views?
that?" I'm like, "I don't know. I don't know."
What was the difference?
Oh, a lot, like significant. Like Peter's has been watched significantly more than Mike. Um, and I don't know. I think people like a good train wreck. Like they can't look away. They're like, "Oh
Yeah.
man, ooh." Oh
Totally.
God, no, please. Oh, did you say, oh, you can't say that. Why did you say that?
I also think the fact that you kind of primed it on your social with the visual of a train wreck, it kind of
I mean, there's no other way.
draw.
Imagine going to watch that thinking like, oh, we're gonna watch an interview, it's gonna be fun. And you're like, oh, the horror, the
Okay,
humanity.
leave him alone and let's leave the interview alone.
I just want you to feel relaxed that like, okay, like we've already played out the worst case scenario and it's disarmed. Like it can't be that bad. So just relax. Just you don't worry about how short it is. Are we talking too much? The longest one has been like an hour and 10 minutes. If you win and you're the longest, then we had a lot to talk about, and that's great. And if it's somewhere between that and I think the shortest was like 40 minutes, then great. Whatever happens, it's gonna be fine.
Okay.
So go ahead.
What was the question again? How did I get here?
Yeah.
How did I get here? That's a good question. Well, the story involves your wife.
And speaking of my wife, today is her
Happy birthday, Mary.
happy birthday to you. It's a very sad song. Happy birthday to you. Thank you, Trevor Noah, for telling us that it's depressing. Happy birthday, dear Mary. Happy birthday
To
to
you.
you. So she's actually going to be mad that we sang the sad birthday song. Like there's like what's the other one that you like? What's the
Stevie Wonder.
Yeah, how does that one go?
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. I'm not going to keep singing.
Why?
No,
It's her birthday. You gotta.
I know. But at some point, like the verse shifts, and I don't know how it goes.
Ah, well, anyway, happy birthday, Mary.
Happy birthday. Okay, back
So
to the.
how does Mary play into the story?
So you referenced in your other interviews the NYU people. I'm one of the NYU peeps. My freshman year, there was a trip that was being organized by a group of Venn youth from our area, New York, New Jersey, and Boston.
They're not youth anymore?
No, we're all past that.
I'm youth. Look, I'm wearing a sweatshirt and it's got like holes in it and stuff, and like it's an afro and a mustache. I'm youth. Speak for yourself.
So most of us are no longer youth, but
Fine. Deal.
so those of us that were on the trip, or those of us that were part of this trip that was being organized, this was in the spring summer of 1999. So I was a freshman in college. Paul was 2 years ahead, and so was Phoebe at Columbia, George Phil, who was at Columbia, um, and then there was a bunch of people from Boston. Mary was one of them. So they were organizing this trip to volunteer with the Coptic mission here in Kenya, and it was intended to be a multi-country trip to, I think it was supposed to be Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda. At some point, it shifted to just be Tanzania and Kenya. And they had been like planning for months and months. I mean, they had all these like remote before it was even a thing, like Bible studies and like preparation for the trip, for like cross cultural communication and ministry and all these things. And like the week before they had to like make the payment with the travel agent, George McFeel called me from within the group to be like, why aren't you coming with us? And I was like, I don't know, it's Paul's trip. And he was like, that's not a reason. And he's like, so why aren't you coming with us again? And I was like, I had a million excuses, all of which had nothing to do with any valid reason. I just, I never saw myself as being part of this trip, even as much as I was, you know, being a part of the group as they were meeting in some of the sessions that they had. And so he said, well, why don't you just pray about it and then, let us know. But let us know tomorrow. So this was like one of the few times in my life where I've ever done like a super conditional prayer. And so I prayed that night about it, and I was like, God, if this is, your will for me to go on this trip, don't let my parents say no, not even once. That was literally
Which is a big thing.
right.
They almost right now they're saying no, and they don't know why they're saying no. Like there's some sort of cosmic connection right now between your conversation with me, and they're in their living room right now going, no, no, no. They don't know why they're saying no, but they're just saying no.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so so I said that prayer, and then the next day woke up, called my parents, like they were both in their respective workplaces. So I called my dad. He said basically, sure, tell your mom. And I was like, okay.
Who is
Called
this?
my mom. Yeah. Called my mom, and she was like, okay, tell your dad. And I was like, what just happened? I guess
You're
I'm
like,
going.
no, 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 no. This is where you flip out and say, la, 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 la.
Yeah, that's not how it went down. And so I mean, within that, however many minutes of doing the 2 phone calls, I was going. And then I called George and was like, they said yes, I guess I'm in. And it was, to me, that unintentional a reason, but it was so divine from the perspective of God and just the purpose that he had for me. And I was also like, I was one of those freshmen where I changed my major maybe 20 times in the first semester. Like I had no clear path for what is my life's work going to be about. I had no clue. And so went on this trip with this team. We were a group of 11, I think, all together. And we spent 6 weeks in Kenya and in Tanzania serving with the Coptic mission. And I can't really explain it any other way except to say that on the first day, so like we landed, we slept, the next morning, our first day, we went out for service in the afternoon. And I just knew. It was like something that I can never explain in a tangible way, that I just knew that my life's work was going to be here. And I didn't know how, because we grow up with this very finite lens of what service looks like.
Mm.
And you're a teacher, a minister, um, something that is more oriented towards spiritual discipleship. And I knew that that's not my gifting. um, so I had no idea how my life's work would take shape. I just knew that it was here. And then it was over the years that followed, after leaving that trip, after continuing to study and to pray and to learn more about, with every visit that I took to come back to Kenya, between that first trip and when I actually moved in 2004, it was just a series of unfolding, seeing more and more as to exactly what my life's work would be, which is to respond to the HIV crisis. Um, and so I have been here since 2004, working in response to HIV and how it affects communities here, and doing that in different capacities, mostly all through, even if it's not like a direct medical service, because I'm not a medical person, as you know. So more just the public health side of it through programs. And I'm currently working with an organization that gives grants to African civil society organizations that are responding to both HIV and water, hygiene, and sanitation issues in their communities. It's called Bloodwater. And so I oversee all of our work in Eastern and Southern Africa that's providing grants responding to these community challenges. So it's kind of how I got here, the short version, but um, why I stayed is really because of having a very clear understanding of what my life's work um, should be about. And I really I can't imagine doing anything else than what I am currently doing.
It came up actually with several people so far how, as Copts, okay, here's your options.
Yeah.
And you are, I mean, like the most clear example of, uh, yeah, no, I don't like any of those options. And it's like, okay, well, what are you gonna do? Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm just gonna kind of do whatever I want. And like that not really computing for
Yeah.
people in our community. And again, with several people, I think Jonathan Adley, Nermeen Riyad,
Mhm.
um, and several others, it came up in conversation how, you know, we have this identity as being Copts, and our parents were the ones that shared with us what it means to be Coptic, and their experience of being Coptic is largely determined by how Egypt has been for the last 70 years, right?
Yeah.
Where there was such a thing as being Coptic before Gamal Abdel Nasser came into power and said, this is what Egypt is going to be like. So if we are going to be Copts in the diaspora, right, we're going to be Copts in 2020, why are we limited by that 70-year history?
Yeah.
And people like you are kind of a anomaly, but they're also not, right? Because even those of us that sort of followed the chosen path, you're going to be a doctor, yes, okay. You're going to get married, okay, yes, okay. You're going to have children, okay, okay. You're going to raise them in the church, okay, okay, okay. And like we do all these things, we still don't see ourselves, right, as this sort of traditional, like, oh, I'm Coptic in the way that, you know, you are Coptic in Egypt. And even in Egypt, people will tell me, like, no, that's kind of like a false identity that Copts in the diaspora think is true of Copts in Egypt that Copts in Egypt don't even really believe, right? So even in Egypt, it becomes something that is kind of this mistaken false identity. So how does that um, how does that false identity play into your identity, right? Like how do you see yourself in juxtaposition to this sort of caricature of what it means to be Coptic?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because I don't even I don't ask myself that. That's not a question that crosses my mind ever. Um, and I actually did find it interesting just in kind of seeing some of the other interviews that this idea of identity keeps coming up. And I think it says something about our experience as, the first generation growing up in a country that's not the country of our parents' birth. It's not the culture that our parents are like trying so hard to pass down to us and create for us. It almost it's like this to be asking the question of identity. I think even when we are in our 40s, it almost kind of captures to me a trauma that I think it's really worth letting go of. I never question who I am in the context of probably the most expected, parameters or questions like what you're saying. How am I doing as a Coptic person, as a Coptic American, Egyptian American person? For me, my experience has been and I know a lot of us have shared this thought of like, we have spent so much time in our lives feeling like an other. And then just that has created such a desire for, finding a place of belonging. And I feel like my life's journey has been like, you feel like an other. Let's keep that going and, just be planted in places where you're always an other. And let that be the thing that drives your ability to still connect, to still have community, to still love and live and serve, and not be bound by the things that we're told are supposed to be defining of who we are. And so I just, yeah, I feel that there's something to be said about not focusing so much on identity, but in living in community wherever you're planted, even if that community is not one that you like immediately identify with in any kind of accessibly tangible way, be it culturally, be it faith, be it nationality, any of those kinds of things. So
Is this why you refer to yourself as Coptic American, Egyptian American, even though you've lived in Kenya for 16 years now?
years, yeah. So I kind of say it as like, um, my blood is Egyptian, my upbringing is kind of American, kind of Egyptian. My adult life has been primarily in Kenya. I'm culturally confused. But I also feel like so enriched by all of that.
And that's why I realized when you were talking, I'm like, Egyptian American. I'm like, what are you talking about? You're Egyptian Kenyan. Like, I don't, I like, I don't, I don't know if being raised in Plainview to Egyptian parents for 18 years, which, being raised in Jericho and Puerto Rico and Egypt and Queens to Egyptian parents, like, I can tell you, like, that was a trip. Like, that was a ride. Like, I was like, who are you? Like, I don't know. Like, where are you from? I don't know what you mean.
Oh, yeah.
I had like what I don't. Oh, so you're from Plainview / Jericho. Oh, you're Jewish? Like, no, no, no. Like, most people there are Jewish, but I'm not. Oh, so you're Egyptian. Like, yeah, kind of, but like my parents are really Egyptian. I'm kind of like just this. I don't know. I don't know.
Being in between.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you go to NYU, right? Which, college for all of us is like 4 years of like, you know, like you're just kind of,
Life.
what, you're what?
Best years of my life. NYU was the greatest.
And, and, and yeah, it's fun and it's educational and we grow, but like, you know, your identity is an NYU student, right? Which is not like you're 40 now, like you're not an NYU student anymore. So it's like, okay, well, that doesn't count. And then you've got a couple years in the United States as like this primordial pseudo adult, right?
Yeah.
That also doesn't count. And then your real like substance of who you are that you can put a finger on, something that you've claimed, something that you say, I chose this and I own this and I've contributed to society through it. And my reason for being is these last 16 years of my life. You still don't say that it's part of your identity, because when you say I identify as, you say Egyptian American, and it's like, okay, hold on a second. Like,
I don't. It's those are the things that I almost feel like we're trained to say, particularly given like just the American context and like how, if anything that the past few years has shown us is just how charged it is to be an immigrant, even if you are, if you were born and raised, but you are from an immigrant family, like there's still something there that you are never considered fully American. And so it's like, those are the things that we're expected to say, but I can't say that I don't really, yeah,
There's
I
no
don't,
way.
yeah,
There's no
there's,
way. Like it can't be, right? It's
yeah,
it's 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 real life theater where it's like, oh, what's your identity? Oh, I'm Egyptian American. Like, no,
yeah,
you're not. Well, we need you to put a different label on it. And you're like, if I try to label this, I'm just going to be confused, right? But if instead you say what you said, which is, no, I'm just going to define myself based on my community, right? Then it becomes much more clear because that community isn't limited to a label, right? Because you can have overlapping Venn diagrams where it's like, yes, I'm connected to the Coptic community this way. I'm connected to Egypt this way. I'm connected to the United States this way. I'm connected to Kenya this way, to this faith community this way, this other faith community this way. And then it's like, okay, you don't need to pick, okay, I want you to put a pin in the part of the Venn diagram that's most meaningful to you. It's like, no. Here are my connections. You sort it out and you can label it whatever you want. And I don't really care.
yeah. No, that is the result of trauma, I think.
Well,
Yeah.
so let me ask you this though. Um, you're using the word trauma, which has a value judgment associated, right? Let me give you an alternative where you're born in a suit like I was. You never leave a suit. You stay there. You go to school there. You work there, and you do what anybody does. You have very little awareness of what the outside world is like, and you're just insulated and isolated, and you just kind of live your life in that way, where it's
Mhm.
much simpler, right? And this can be true of any person that has a sort of homogenous, linear experience instead of this all over the place. Would that be non-trauma? Would that be something that you would consider to be um, the normal state that you're framing this trauma against?
No, I don't think it's at all anything to do with like something being normal or not normal. But I guess maybe I'm not using trauma in the clinical way, but it really is about just like the forced selection of something to define you at the expense of the other aspects of who you are. Like that is a trauma in the sense that it's forced, it's fracturing, um, and it also creates a condition that it conditions a response in a certain way that like nobody asks you a question about your identity and you're just like feeling good, feeling fine. It's like it's really disruptive because even just the process of having to somehow qualify and quantify who you are as a being in a statement. I don't think that's normal. Like that's not normal.
Right. So it's not the experiences, right? It's not
Yeah.
the disjointedness, right?
No.
It's not the fact that like the real answer to who are you is me. I'm me. I don't, you know, I don't know anyone else that grew up in Plainview to Egyptian parents and then went to NYU and then moved to Kenya to do HIV work. I don't know anybody else who did that. Like if there were someone else, then we could like get together and be like, what do you want to call ourselves? Oh, let's call ourselves the Stapler Society. And like people would be like, well, there's a stapler here. So that's
I
the
knew
only.
there was a for
No,
it.
I mean, it's literally like, oh, Stapler Society. And then when someone asks us, who are we? We say, we're the Stapler Society. And people are like, oh, you grew up in Plainview to Egyptian parents, went to NYU, and you moved to Kenya to do HIV work? Okay, yeah, yeah, I've heard of you guys. I've heard of you guys. But like when we don't fall into like a clean category, right? The trauma is not the 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 experiences that we've had. It's the people that have only seen a certain thing, that only see the world a certain way, that only have a perspective that is driven by this singular identity,
Yeah.
and they can respond very clearly like, oh, I'm evangelical Christian, or I'm, cradle Roman Catholic, I'm Egyptian born and raised in Asyut, I am a, I don't know, like name it, as a cohesive group that you align enough with, that it defines enough of who you are, that you're like, yes, I'm an individual, but I identify as this identity, and it's a shared identity, right? But for, I
So
think,
there's something there also about this like constant need to define and like present, which I don't understand. Like to me, that's such a I don't know. It's not something that is is familiar to me anymore. So that's why I'm almost wondering if there's something about the experience of being, you know, an immigrant community in a different country that creates that. Um, you know, we should all be able to find community anywhere that we land. It shouldn't be something that is based on identifiers per se, but like imagine if all of the aspects of who we are individually, all of it, like cross sections of ideology and personality and preference and experiences and culture, all of those things, which are too many to count, is the exact mix that by design God has allowed so that we literally could find community anywhere we go. And the whole point of life and service is really just to be in community with others. Like we were designed for that. And some people have the luxury of choice. They can choose where they want to be. They can choose who they, what they want their community to look like. And some people don't. There are some seasons of life where that choice is there, and there are some seasons when it's not. Um, but yeah, I try to consider that the gift of being many, many things and not any one thing at any time, because it allows me to be able to have community, like wherever I'm going, even if it is like a really short trip for work to some place in Malawi or Ethiopia, or where I've built my life here in Nairobi, or even when I go back to New York and visit um, for a few months in the year, which I do. Thanks, COVID. Um, outside of this year, um, it allows you to still have community in all those places, even if you're never only in one place all the time.
one thing I wrote about recently was anti-fragility of dialogue,
Mm-hmm.
and I referenced Nicholas Nassim Taleb, where he talks about things that are fragile are going to fall apart if um, they experience stress. And the opposite of that is not things that are durable when they experience stress, but things that actually grow stronger when they experience
Mm-hmm.
stress. And he said
Mm-hmm.
there's no word for that, because durability is not something that gets stronger. So he coined the term anti-fragility.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're talking, it reminds me of that concept. And for that paper that I wrote, I um, connected it to dialogue. But I think that you can extend that dialogue to experiences, like lived experiences, and you can extend it to being a member of a diverse community,
Mhm.
right? Because if the community is homogenous and that's the only thing that you're used to, then the second you get taken out of that community, it's like, I don't know how to function. I don't like, I want to go back to where it's warm and cozy and I know what it feels like, what it smells like, what it tastes like, and how people interact with each other, right? And that's a very fragile state, right?
Yeah.
Um, that Coptic bubble, for example, that Rabbi Aziz said, no, I think that's silly, is fragile.
Yeah.
But if we are able to diversify our community where we understand what the real world looks like, where not everything is so clear, things are messy sometimes. Um, you know, we're doing it not in a haphazard way, but like you did with your decision to go to Kenya the first time, like in a prayerful way that invites God to be sort of the rudder on this ship. Um, we're able to experience different things, be part of diverse communities where, you know, you could drop us anywhere. Like, I think you and I could be, you know, throwing a dart onto a map where it's like, okay, like, I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but like, okay,
Good.
like, drop me off in Siberia. It's like, oh man, it's cold. Like, you couldn't have hit, you know, something like more central, like on the globe, so that at least it would be warmer. Um, but fine, take us there, and we're gonna be like, okay, like it's not gonna be as bad as being the Egyptian kid in a Jewish neighborhood in Long Island. Like what, like what's gonna happen? So yeah, I think what you're saying is that you know, there's this anti-fragility to having diverse experiences. Um, would you say that this is something people can choose, or is this something that happens to people sort of, you know, outside of their control?
I think it can be both. It's both and. I don't think there's any way to like script it per se. I know that there are people that pursue um, just the constant pushing of comfort zones and trying to experience new things and new places. There's that, but there's also the unplanned opportunities that unfold, and you can take them or not. Um, it kind of connects back to me just around this like openness or a willing, like just having more of like an open hand towards your life, and really just kind of understanding that not everything unfolds in the way that you're told it's supposed to unfold, or in the way that it is scripted by Hollywood, family, culture, like fill in the blank, all of the above. There's like all these templates and models that are being provided for us throughout our upbringing, but how how closed fisted are you around what your life is going to look like and become, or how open will you be, and in that openness receive things that you had no idea could even be on the spectrum of your options. Or I think even just being open-handed towards um, the changes that, like, there's so much. Also, if this year has taught us nothing else, it's that we actually have very little control over how things will go in the day to day. And it's just kind of people that have learned the lessons earlier on in life about, like, I didn't see this coming. It's now here. Pivot, just like a small shift. And then you kind of adapt and keep going. It's just being able to be flexible and open-handed with the things that we have no control over. You can still have desires and hopes and plans and even pursue them, but just be flexible with what you meet along the way, and allow that also to speak into who you are becoming. Because I also think that that doesn't stop. You know, the work that I'm doing now is very different from what I did when I moved in 2004. And if I was very rigid about it, I don't know that I would be where I am now. I'm just kind of doing the kinds of things that I'm doing in the HIV sector that I'm doing now, because it's at a completely different level. Um, and the conversations that I'm having are different now. And I think that's part of growth, and that's part of what happens when your purpose unfolds. The more and more that you are in it, the more and more that you are like actually doing the work and letting the work change you and transform you, that then that also unfolds and evolves with more clarity, sometimes more complexity, but I mean, with a lot of intention. Um, yeah.
Tell me more about that intention. What is the core that defines that intention?
If, okay, so we all ascribe to different, we all ascribe to some belief system,
Okay.
right? And as a person of Christian faith, I believe 100% that there are some aspects of my life that that God has prepared for me and is unfolding for me in the day to day. Whether or not I respond to that is totally in my hands, is totally my choice. But I 100% have experienced that in this living into purpose, living into my purpose, and seeing how it has evolved over the years, the experiences, good and the bad, the different kinds of exposures to circumstances and work and layers in the work, and understanding the gray that exists in, you know, issues to do with HIV vulnerability and risk, and the cultural, medical, political, all the things, just kind of pressing into that and really experiencing that and letting that totally disrupt my understanding of, you know, this is the way that things should be, this is right, this is wrong, and letting that transform um, also then how I'm doing my work and how I am living out my call in this industry, that it's so deliberate. You know, what looks totally random in the day to day, I think is so intentional. And it's actually this process of being prepared to go deeper and deeper into the issues that oftentimes, like 20 years in, your work will be way more complex, way more sensitive, way harder to navigate, more politics to juggle, more advocacy that you need, more consensus building that than just day one, which was a lot of like yes, no, sure, this seems right, let's do this, this service looks this way. And it's a process that is very deliberate, I think, to kind of prepare and get you to a place where you can handle greater leadership, greater degree of responsibility, and really navigate just the complexities of whatever your purpose is.
So if you generalize that, then you're saying that there isn't one worldview and there isn't one lens that is going to be universal and self-sufficient and not subject to disruption and subject to question, right? Like the whole, I think the crux of what you're saying is that you have this idea, you have this way of seeing things, but it's going to be challenged and questioned, right? So responding to those challenges and questions is going to be key, right?
Yeah.
So,
Well, yeah, interacting with them and responding.
so what if someone says, well, maybe you, because you're confused, but I am X, right? And this X could be anything, right? It could be I'm Christian and I don't need to question my Christianity. I'm atheist and I don't need to question my atheist. Like whatever it is, like I have an airtight worldview that everyone else should have.
Yeah.
And if they did, then they wouldn't be so confused. But because I get it and you
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah, I mean, that person is probably, I don't know if this is going to come across as a judgment to that hypothetical person, but I mean, that person is probably living life very much on the surface because there's enough things happening in the world around us in the day to day circumstances of life that force its way into your family and your, you know, your very personal existence that should cause question. Yeah. So if a person is able to create that kind of an existence, they're probably not actually engaging much with the world around them.
And what if they think that's a good thing? Yeah, the world just pollutes us. The world just ruins everything. So if we can insulate ourselves and continue in our pure faith, then we're better off.
I mean, that's a really lonely existence.
Is
I
it
don't see,
sustainable?
huh?
Is it sustainable?
Um, I mean, I'm sure there's space in this world for all kinds of people to make all things possible for themselves. So it may be sustainable to a certain size or scope, but it has a cap. For sure, it has a cap.
So I obviously I mean, look at the people that I'm talking to, look at the people that I'm having these conversations with. Like I I am way past like you know, if I wanted to go back into the womb and be a sort of, you know, eyes closed fetus that, doesn't see the world, I maybe I would choose that and just be like, okay, it would be easier than, being so all over the place. But I'm way past that point, right? So I'm obviously biased. Um, but I think if I'm going to speak for myself, I do have a little bit of envy for people that are in that kind of bubble.
Really?
A little bit. A
What?
little,
I don't do that.
because it's so simple, right? Like I agree with you that it's not sustainable and like there's a cap on it and like guy, like seriously, like let's just not even shatter this worldview. Let's just tap on it a little bit. It's so fragile that it falls apart.
Yeah.
But I mean, to have the conviction and to have the ability to, sustain that in the face of, you know, a reality that's just not compatible with it. I'm like, wow. I mean, at least it keeps things really simple. You don't have to wrestle with all these, existential crises. You just kind of go, no, this is just the way that it is. It's the only way that it can be. It's like, okay, well,
But yeah, I would challenge that. I mean, if my cat's here, I don't know if you hear that. My cat may be jumping onto this call any moment now.
it's fun. I just saw a funny cartoon of uh, preparing for your Zoom meeting, and it's a guy sitting in front of a computer, and his cat is like duct taped to the wall in front of him.
Oh, that would never fly here. Um, I would challenge that only because it's I would challenge that with the thought or the question, but what if we weren't created for that?
Hmm.
And when you think about, I mean, there's so many examples in the Bible Abraham, I'm sending you out from this land that you have known, this land of your fathers and your forefathers, to a land you have no idea where it is, who the people are, but I'm sending you there. And your descendants will be greater than all the stars in the sky. Like, we were not called to that. And even when you look at like the apostles, for example, and thinking about in Acts, after the resurrection, the disciples are being sent out to who? Not to the Jews, to the Gentiles. You know, we are always being called to step outside of what is most common to who we are, to a different, and you know, this is not about geography. This really is about extending what you define community to be. Community,
it could be your neighbor across the street that you've never talked to because you think that they're different from you.
Yeah, but it's the idea of, can we as people of faith actually be community builders everywhere we go, no matter who we're encountering, no matter what context, culturally, geographically it is. Can we be somebody that is actually building community rather than, you know, positioning yourself around it?
What does that mean, positioning yourself around it?
Like, don't just be on the outside examining and seeing, you know, do I fit? Does this fit with me? Rather than just stepping in and being a part of the place that you are. Even if it's extremely temporary, but just the idea of finding connection everywhere you go, wherever you're called, for however long or short that is. Because there's something in that relating to another person, that it's not just about what you are offering them, but they're also depositing and offering something to you that I think just continues with this like cycle of like adding to and becoming more and more of like the fullness of who, you know, you were created to be. And that is never going to happen in isolation.
So this just boils down to your fundamental belief that God wants us to explore and discover ourselves and be ourselves. And it's fundamentally contrary to another Christian's belief that what God wants is for us to shelter ourselves and to be this isolated community, that we are functioning best as Christians amongst ourselves. And I suppose this is the point in our conversation where I must ask you something. Mm-hmm. Why do you get to decide what it means to be Christian?
Oh, I don't get to decide.
So why is it that someone should believe you when it might be an actual majority, right? There might even be a louder, more authoritative voice saying, she's wrong. What it means to be Christian is to stay inside, to you know, do what we tell you to do, and you know, we define who we are. We don't let the world define who we are.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm not interested, just kind of like our pregame conversation. I'm not interested in, you know, the convincing and the arguments. Like, people are free to believe whatever they want to believe. That's totally, go with it. I just see a lot of contrary examples in the, you just take the thread beginning to end of the story of the Bible, Old Testament to New Testament, it's a lot of being called out of comfortable, being called out of what is known, stepping into the unknown, being transformed in process by the discomfort of having to trust and have faith in things that you cannot see or understand, but believe that a God who is so great to create a world that is as diverse as ours has enough space for the body of Christ to express itself as diversely as it does. He can handle it.
So are you saying that it's more faithful to not be afraid?
I don't know. I'm not saying, I'm saying that our great sovereign Father can handle our questions, can handle our discomfort, can handle our frustrations way better than we can.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be resolved in one conversation or in one pandemic or in one church crisis. But I think that it's important to short circuit that faulty logic that things are simple and that if we just do X, Y, and Z, we'll be fine. No, there's really no guarantee that
Yeah.
if you do W, X, Y, and Z, that you'll be fine. But rediscovering what it means to be fine is something that we have to trust God to help us through. So,
yeah. And also trusting Him that when we are not fine and when things are not fine, that even that He redeems.
right, right. And we're not seeking after suffering, we're not seeking after problems, but we're seeking after a sense of meaning that transcends just being, part of a homogenous group, right? And having diverse experiences and, not being scared to go outside of the four walls of the church because, what's gonna be outside? Like, okay, well, let's find out. Let's see what's out there and trust that God, is calling us to do more than just, go through the motions. I don't know.
We need both. We need within the walls and we need outside of
Right.
the wall. We need to be able, we need to be sensitive enough to know where we're being called and positioned to.
And that's an important point that you're bringing up. Like, I don't think I or any one of these people that's advocating for varied experiences is saying do these varied experiences at the expense of your connection to your church community. Like, no, it's not. Do we go out or do we stay in? No, it's a breathing in and a breathing out, right? Like Teilhard de Chardin says, this is something that we get nourished by the community. But if the only thing is that we take nourishment and there's nothing that is a breathing out of our service and our experience in the world, then either one by itself becomes fatal.
Yeah.
Cool. So Nadia, I am happy that we actually ended up on that note of groundedness, right? Of saying, no, it's not just about going out and but having that being part of an ongoing discovery of self and discovering of identity and discovery of this identity being this complex interweaving of different communities that we're a part of. That's a very special gift that you have taught me. And I appreciate that. Any parting thoughts for anyone who's still listening?
I got nothing.
Well, that's good enough for me. Thank you, Nadia.
I hope I see you at Christmas time.
Do you okay, hold on. Do you think we'll see each other this Christmas like we usually do?
I don't know. I'm still not clear on the whole traveling situation.
I mean, I'm supposed to see Paul.
It's my cat.
Hi, cat. Is that still what's the
Noor?
Yeah, same cat, like from wow.
Sorry.
God give him long cat life.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm supposed to see Paul. But obviously it's not going to be like normal, right? It's going to be under all these like, precautions and circumstances. And what about my mom? And what about your parents? And what about this? And what about work? And what about testing? And nothing's simple. But I think to your point earlier, I think it just requires a pivot, right? And a recognition that we're committed to these relationships. And whether we see you this Christmas or next Christmas or in the spring, or we come to Kenya to visit, which would be awesome. I think again, if the only thing that we'd ever known is okay, like you live in Plainview, I live in Jericho, we live down the street from each other, we see each other all the time, and things are simple, then we'd be like, oh, COVID, the sky's falling, right? But it's like, okay, like Paul lives in California, you live in Kenya, I live in Boston. Okay, like we'll see each other, right? We're gonna see each other. Like, yeah. Is it this Christmas? Is it next Christmas? Is it the spring? Is it in Kenya? Are we gonna meet in Florence? Like, I don't know.
That would be a good one.
I don't know, but like we appreciated the few and far between times where we got to see each other before. We still appreciate it now. Like we never took it for granted. We don't take it for granted now. It's just going to be delayed a little bit.
Yeah. Pivot.
Yeah, we just got to pivot and be anti-fragile.
Anti-fragile.
All right. Thank you, Nadia, and thank you for listening.